live and move and have our being. Amen.
Amen.
So today's gospel story is a bit longish, but it's important that we get to hear the whole thing together rather than try to separate it and read part of it this week and part of it next week. And that's because it's a story that's sandwiched between two pieces of another story. It's actually a very interesting literary device, and it's a very excellent way to make larger points about both stories, which are pretty big stuff to begin with. So the sequence goes like this. Jesus is by the Sea of Galilee with a crowd of his followers, teaching and preaching and healing. He's suddenly approached by one of the leaders of the synagogue, who asks him to come and heal his daughter, who is apparently very sick. Jesus agrees to go with him, and while he's on the way to heal the man's daughter, another woman, another daughter of God, and Jesus addressed her that way. He says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." This other woman sneaks up behind Jesus and essentially steals his healing power to make herself well. She sneaks up and steals it. How very strange. But rather than being angry with her, Jesus actually commends her for her faith and sends her on her way, healed of her affliction and strong in the faith that gave her the courage to break the law by touching a man who was a stranger to her in public. So Jesus is commending not just her faith, he's commending her courage, her audacity as well. And then some people come running up to tell the leader of the synagogue that his daughter had, in fact, just died. No need to trouble Jesus any further, they say. It was too late for his little girl to be healed. But Jesus tells the man to have faith, to have that same courageous faith that the other woman had just shown them. Don't be afraid, just believe, Jesus says to the now grieving father. And they go to his house, and Jesus raises the little girl from the dead. He raises her from the dead. So this one amazing story is actually two amazing stories. And I'd like to try to point out to you a couple of larger points that can be drawn from both of these stories being brought together as one. So first, back to the daughter thing. These were both women. One was a little girl, about 12 years old. The other was a mature woman, and she sounds as if she could be a little bit older. According to his time and social custom and religion, Jesus was not supposed to have anything whatsoever to do with either one of them. They were just women, after all. And one was a child. And children were utterly discounted and marginalized in that society. Surely she was not worthy of Jesus' attention at all, let alone that she should be the recipient of one of his greatest miracles. The other was presumably an older woman who had some sort of a chronic bleeding disorder. We're told that she had been hemorrhaging for many, many years. 12 years, in fact, the exact same amount of time that the other little girl had been alive. That fact alone, the fact that she was bleeding, made her as good as a leper. Good as a leper. She was a social outcast who was considered to be ritually unclean at all times. She wasn't even allowed to be out in public with other people. No wonder she had to sneak around in order to get the miracle that would change her life. No wonder. She probably figured that, you know what, she should just go for broke because she had nothing to lose. This woman had nothing to lose. Maybe she was as good as dead too. Maybe she was just as dead as the little girl who had died. These stories, besides telling us that Jesus had power over the natural world, including power over life and death, these stories tell us that Jesus went out of his way to reach out to those who were discounted and marginalized by others, including, and perhaps especially, women. Women, daughters of God, beloved daughters of God. The other point I'd like to leave you with this morning has to do with something that we can learn from this sandwich story and maybe even apply to our own lives. So notice, if you will, that these two amazing miracles that Jesus performed for these two amazing women, these two amazing miracles were actually interruptions. They were interruptions. First, Jesus was interrupted by the synagogue official while he was doing other things. And then he was interrupted by the other woman while he was on his way to see about the thing that was the interruption in the first place. So that's an interruption to the interruption, if you're following the story. Talk about multitasking. But the point is this. We often think that we know exactly where we're going and what we're supposed to be doing in life. Don't we? I do. Yeah. Task lists, calendars, appointments, schedules. We've got it all figured out. Especially those of us who have a little control freak running around inside us, which is probably most of us, I think. But often enough, God has other plans. God has other plans for us. Some of the most moving experiences that I've had in my life of ministry have come about as a direct result of interruptions. Yeah. So I've learned to minister to the interruptions, right? More than that, I've learned that the interruptions are actually God's way of saying, look here is what I want you to do right now. This is what I think is important. This is what you should pay attention to right now. This person, this interruption, is who you should love and serve for me, right here and right now. Ministry is what God puts in front of you. There's a great old story about one of the saints, John Vianney, the cure of ours, who was constantly being interrupted by people who came to him for help because he had a reputation of helping everybody. So at some point, the priests, the other priests with whom he lived, he was a parish priest, and he ended up being the patron saint of parish priests. This story might be one of the reasons why. At some point, his other housemates, who were also priests, asked him why it never seemed to bother him to be constantly pulled away from his prayers in order to tend to the needs of all the people who came to him for help. And he said, I leave God to go to God. I leave God to go to God. So the next time you're interrupted, especially if it's by someone you're called to love and serve, leave God and go to God. Listen to the voice of God speaking to you through your experience of the present moment. The grace of God comes to you as your life. And ministry is what God puts in front of you. Because God is saying, look here. Here is what I want you to do right now. This is what I think is important. This is what you should pay attention to right now. This person, this interruption, is who you should love and serve for me, right here and right now. So, when God calls you by way of an interruption, leave God and go to God. Always.